So yesterday, someone tagged me in Sincerely Amanda's post about Rhys being the villain of the Massverse, and I just wanted to add to that because I've literally been saying since the beginning that he's going to be some sort of betrayal and that I think his beast form is a Valg demon. People seem to forget that in ACOWAR, I'm going to go in chronological order, in ACOWAR, Feyre has to siphon him to fix the cauldron, right? But when he was dead, he was floating in the void, which was the cauldron, basically. But he was also able to reach out his hand and bring back Amren when he was in there, which was a little suspicious to me. I was like, okay, so he's in the void, he can bring back Amren, that's weird. Thought nothing of it. Then in Akasif, when Nesta's having her nightmare, he uses his Daemati power, which is a Valg Prince power, by the way, according to Maeve, who I think is his descendant. He goes into the void using his power, finds Nesta floating there, the cauldron trying to take her back, reaches out a hand, grabs Nesta, brings her back into her body, and then goes back into his body. So Rhys is a World Walker Wayfarer like Maeve. Who's to say he isn't mind manipulating everybody, like Maeve? Not to mention that quote I'm going to bring up again from Akathas, where Rhys says, oh, I wish I could, like, skip this week, and Cassian says, with that power of yours, why don't you just do it? And then Rhys is just like, so we know that Rhys can world walk, or at the very least, enter the void. Then, of course, we have the scene where Rhys sees Aelin falling through the worlds, falling through the sky. And SJM has confirmed that while Rhys saw Aelin as a person, the rest of the IC only saw a red comet, which makes you wonder, why did he see a person enough to be able to reach out and slow her down, especially from that far away? Now, the irony here is that Rhys slowed down Aelin enough so that she could get back to Terrasen to destroy Maeve. He basically helped Aelin destroy his ancestor, which is kind of funny to me. But there's the whole full circle ironic thing about that. And then we have the end of Crescent City 2. Now, at the end of Crescent City 2, as we know, spoiler alert if you haven't read it, Bryce lands in front of the river house in Velaris. She falls through the gate, kind of like Aelin did, and the Star Sword brings her to the knife, which, as we know, Azriel has. She lands in front of the river house. And Azriel takes her to the House of Wind. And when Rhys walks in, he is not one bit shocked to see an alien from another planet speaking the old Fae language that he was forced to learn as a child, which is very suspicious, standing in his living room, and he's just like, what's your name? He doesn't seem shocked at all that this happened. I wonder if he saw Bryce in the void one of those 2 times that he was in it, like maybe coming down or something. Now, Rhys has an orrery in his study, just like the Autumn King did, and we know the Autumn King was obsessed with other worlds and everything. I'm wondering what Rhys was taught by his father before the father died, and what he knew about the other planets, what he knew about his own powers. We know that Rhys's beast form looks exactly like Maeve's Valg form, aside from the wings. Maeve admits that Daemati power is Valg Prince power, and we also know that Maeve used it to convince everybody that she was Mab and Mora's older sister when she wasn't. So my question is, what is Rhys having people believe about him, or what is he not telling everybody? Obviously, I've been over this a million times in Reels, you guys are going to be so sick of me saying it, but I do think that Rhys's mother was a witch. The 6-pointed necromancy star was in her ring. I will never stop bringing that up. It's weird that his mother was able to talk to the Weaver to get her to protect the ring in her cottage. I think those were all trinkets of witches that the Weaver protected. But if Rhys's father's line was from Maeve, which is what I believe, I think Maeve's line mated with a member of Thea's Starborn line to create Rhys's line, and if his mother was a witch, which we know has Valg in it, he would have gotten Valg from both parents, which means it would have manifested in him. I do think that's why his father was so terrified of him, because remember, his father tried to keep him away from Cassian, Azriel, Tamlin, everybody, because he was afraid of Rhys's power, and he was especially afraid of Rhys, buddying up to anybody else who had significant power who could help him overthrow him. But I don't think that's the only reason he was afraid of Rhys. I think he was afraid of Rhys because he knew that there was Valg somewhere in him that could, come out and something. We know that Rhys's Valg form now as a High Lord is a Valg demon. I've done a bunch of reels with all of the quotes. If you want to go back and look, if you can't find them, feel free to DM me. I will send you all of them. I have a couple just on Rhys. I have a couple on Rhys and Amren being suspicious. I have tons of reels with quotes to back up all my statements. Don't worry. But yeah, I think he got his Valg from both sides of his family, and I think his father and mother both knew that, and that's why his father was so terrified of him. I also think that his mother tried to keep him away from his father because she didn't exactly want him to know, because she didn't really want him to judge himself based on his Valg side. Perhaps he learned about it later in the many books they have, but I also want to add that in Akasif, we saw him being a little more unhinged than he usually is. Rhys usually kind of prides himself on being not as icy as it is with his rage, but he is usually even-keeled enough to control it, right? But he couldn't do that when it came to Nesta, and I feel like we could say that it's just Nesta because he hates Nesta, but I don't think it is. But his eyes turn into black pits, and it's been more than once when he's been angry, and as we know, black pits equals Valg/Asteri, which only proves my theory that he has a Valg demon inside of him, which is his beast form. But then in House of Flame and Shadow, we get the bonus scene of Ember and Randall's bonus chapter, which is really more of a Rhys and Nesta fight, and It's just really bad. It's really bad. He's super unhinged, and I don't like Rhys, but I will even admit, like, he does have every reason to be worried, but he did not have every reason to fly off the fucking handle like that. He was completely unhinged. He was worse than Tamlin at his worst. Tamlin, at the very least, didn't threaten people. He had remorse immediately. Rhys just exploded the room on humans. Azriel shielded them. There was no remorse. There was no I'm sorry. He literally could have killed them. He immediately tells Nesta, the second Bryce opened that portal, you should have swung Ataraxia at her throat. You should have killed her. And he says this multiple times. And then he goes on to threaten Nesta's life, threatens to execute her multiple times. And his eyes are black pits, and he slams the door against the wall. There's darkness leaking out of him, and there's no stars in his eyes, and he is just a Valg demon, pretty much, in that moment with that rage. And Sarah J. Maas is making him unhinged for a reason. And I do think it's going to come down to a power struggle between Nesta and Rhys. Rhys absolutely despises that Nesta is more powerful than him, and yes, Nesta is more powerful than him canonically. I know the quote by heart. Cassian siphons guttered, as if sensing a power far beyond his, far beyond any of theirs. This is when she's bringing back Feyre from the dead with the trove. Now, Rhys despises this, and Rhys especially is bitter about Nesta being able to wield the trove. In Hofast, he's very pissed off by this, because Nesta says, you know, I am not your subject, you are not my High Lord. This was Sarah J. Maas trying to tell us that, yes, Nesta is Queen of the Dust Court. Nesta is not one of Rhys's subjects. She's actually more powerful than Rhys, therefore, she doesn't have to really listen to Rhys. Now, if you've seen my previous reels, you will know about my mist theory. Canonically, in Hofast, mist equals Dust Court, and when Bryce lands in front of the river house, there is mist. This is said tons of times in Hofast. I think the magic's going to revert to the Dust Court when Nesta liberates it, and I think Rhys's Valg is going to come out because he's basically going to realize that Nesta stole his only safe haven in his court, the city that he believes he has been protecting this whole time, and it's going to be Dust Court, not Night Court. And that's going to be a huge thing when his Valg finally comes out. If you've seen my reels about it, that's great. If you haven't and you can't find them, again, feel free to DM me. I will send them to you. But we also have to remember that it wasn't just the trove that doesn't allow Rhys to touch it, but Nesta's blades. Now, we know that Rhys tried to unsheathe them, and he did with very, very, very much of difficulty. It was actively fighting his power, which makes sense if it's Starborn versus Valg. Valg is Asteri, as we know from the Princes of Hell. Thanatos and Adis and Apollyon confirm this, saying that the Asteri used to use black collars to enslave people on previous planets, Trog World, before trying it on Hell, but they were of equal powers. It didn't work before adapting it into the black crown that Hunt wears on Midgard. In conclusion, the Nesta-Rhys fight is going to get Rhys so pissed off that his beast form kind of takes over, his Valg takes over, because in the war, when he was using his beast form, Sarah made a point to make it obvious that Rhys has a harder time coming into and out of his beast form. And I've also done reels on this, but he says a million times within the series that he's afraid to yield himself to that base side of him, that he's afraid of losing himself to that beast, and the other High Lords didn't really have that much difficulty doing so with their own beast forms. And when Tarquin yells at Feyre and Rhys comes over, she says, you know, he was still too far gone in that power to do anything but growl, which was really weird. Also, in a past interview, Sarah J. Maas did say that there will most likely be consequences for Rhys coming back from the dead in Akawar, which we've yet to see, but I think that it's basically him losing control of his Valg, because with everybody, they've had to give something to the cauldron to come back to life. Feyre, Nesta, Elaine gave their humanity, Aelin gave her power. I think Rhys had to give up some control of that base side of him, and now we're seeing the consequences. He's becoming more animalistic, more unhinged, more rageful, more in need of retaliation, as we saw in Tamlin. You know, his eyes are turning into those black pits of his Valg demon. What else has he been doing? Do you think Rhys will be somewhat of a betrayal to the IC and the Massverse?